Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Timothy Maurice Webster, and I will be hosting and facilitating this session on mental health. What a privilege and an honor to be able to take us in this journey over the next 50 minutes. I want to welcome everyone from my side because this conversation is one of the most important conversations to me personally. As a child, I experienced my mother, she struggled with mental health, and I only understood later in life that there were conditions buried in her unconscious mind as she grew up. She lost a brother in a swimming incident when she was a child. And later in life, this incident came back to haunt her. So I've dedicated my career to understanding the brain. My career is focused on applied psychology and applied neuroscience, and really harnessing human potential. And mentoring is something that's very close to my heart. Our masterclass will be given by two extraordinary human beings. One is the CEO of the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, Cassey Chambers, and Tswelo Kodisang. He is a chief people officer at Discovery. These are extraordinary human beings. If you think about the work that's happening at Cassey's organization, they really champion patient advocacy. They've been around for about 24 years. Cassey will be setting the stage and letting us know why it is that about 1 in 3 people suffer from mental health challenges. Mr. Kodisang, Tswelo Kodisang, is an international thinker. He has experience across Africa, Middle East, helping people create the optimal environment at Discovery. And it is an absolute delight to be having this conversation. We're going to lock in and engage you. We look forward to your questions as we go through this conversation. We are thrilled that you're able to join us, and I am excited to make sure that this flows at the highest level. We're going to have a poll coming up in a moment, and in this poll, we want to know how you're feeling. We want to know what's happening with you in your state of mind and how you're feeling. In this poll, rate 1, you are doing very well, up to 5, not well at all. And while you are prepared to do this poll, please click on the screen now and sit up straight, breathe in deeply, allow oxygen into your body, and prepare for this incredible conversation with these two extraordinary people, Tswelo Kodisang and Cassey Chambers. They will be coming up on the screen shortly, and we will be diving into this conversation. And again, please make sure that you send in your questions, because at the end of the conversation, we will be answering any questions that you may have. Again, I'm Timothy Maurice Webster, and what a privilege it is to be able to go on this journey with Discovery. We'd love for you to discover more. I'm going to be learning the same way you are, and the main thing is that every single person on this call, there is a gap between where you are and what your potential is. And always keep in mind as we go through this conversation and as you experience every single masterclass, that to get from where you are to where you want to go often requires mentorship and learning. So I'd like to welcome in our panelists, our speakers for today, Mr. Tswelo Kodisang and Ms. Cassey Chambers. Thank you so much. Welcome, guys. How are you guys doing this morning?
Morning.
Good morning.
Doing good.
Good morning.
Conversation.
Thank you so much, Tswelo. I'd like to start with you, Cassey. How has mentorship played a role in your life in you becoming who you are as CEO?
And good morning to everyone. And such a great question, a very loaded question to start the morning. And I think I've been thinking about that quite a lot in the last couple of days, because we've been so fortunate. I've been so fortunate to actually be mentored by so many different people from all kinds of sectors I think even just thinking when we were a young child, your first mentor is kind of your teachers, it's the people around you. And that theme has really just carried on with the work that I've done and being involved in SADAG. I think when you're working with incredibly passionate people, you can't help but get mentored and inspired and learn so much. I think one of the hugest rewards I get is working with people every day and learning so much from them and their stories and their challenges. And working with clients and other NGOs. But most importantly, I get a lot of mentorship from our SADAG leadership, our founder who started off SADAG from her own experience with mental illness. I think this all really shapes me as a leader, me as someone working at an NPO, working with other people. So it's a really privileged seat to be in. I've got some amazing people that I get to work and interact with on a daily basis. But I think if I had to overall look at the key mentors, I would definitely have to say it's the voices and the people that we help every single day. I think that's our biggest reward that we get, and we learn the most from those. So for me, that's a big standout.
Thank you so much, Cassey. Tswelo?
So I guess a lot of it has got to do maybe with my own upbringing. From a very young age, I had people that played a significant role in my own development. I'm not talking from a mentorship perspective, people that I kind of use the word, that put their hand on my shoulder and help me on my journey. And that's kind of over time, that's continued to be kind of where I am. And as such, at some point, I did a leadership development program and we were asked about our purpose. And my purpose, I defined it as to liberate the potential in others because of, somebody took a moment to liberate my potential and they continue to do that. And as such, I guess paying it forward, I see opportunity of mentoring in liberating the potential in others, because I really believe we've all got talent, and it's more of a nurture person. And as such, I think that's where mentorship plays a very significant role in terms of nurturing.
Thank you. In a moment, I'm going to give you both the opportunity to really unpack a little bit of the work that you do and how we can all learn from it. But before we do that, I want you to answer for me, Cassey. I'd love to hear from you. How do you see mentorship playing a role in creating the society that we all want to live in?
And I think, just in mental health, we really have to rely on mentorship and learning, because there's so much that needs to be improved and so much we can learn just from mental health. And I think, from what I've also just taken in the work that we do is constantly having to learn from others. And even during a time of COVID where we can do a lot of online mentorships, you can watch a TED video, you can Google inspirational quotes and learnings, and you can take from all of that and look at how can we adapt for South Africa. And I think that's been really, really important, even just in the last 12 months, as to how do we learn from other people and other leaders from around the world, and how do we adapt it here in South Africa to what we hope to see mental health should look like, and what we hope that people can then also relate to and to get that help. So for me, it's about relying on a lot of overseas, international, online mentorship as much as possible, and really working at that every single day to adapt it to South Africa. When we look at how many people are suffering or are impacted by mental health, especially now because of COVID, it's so important that we learn as much as we can to make that small difference. In the field that we're also in with regards to SADAG and being NPO, we are a small organization, so we have to rely a lot on mentorships and learning from other people and adapting it to make a difference. The great advantage of a lot of the work that we do as an NPO is that we can make those differences and we can change how we do things in an instant. And that seems to make an impact on people every day. So it's learning from the global community, which is one of the silver linings during COVID, is that a digital mentorship has opened up. And we can actually use that in practice, especially for mental health in South Africa, where we need it so much. Thanks.
Thank you. Tswelo?
Tim, To Cassey's point, one of the things that I've found very interesting in kind of not too distant past has been that digital has democratized so much. So what Cassey kind of says actually resonates a lot, that in the past, it used to be difficult to have access to information, to have access to thought leadership, to have access to just different experiences. But what the digital age has done is just made it, not that far away. You can have conversation or get input from different thought leaders. So podcasts are something that I spend a bit of time on, and I really enjoy. I'm learning about, as an example, from different thought leaders about what's happening in different parts of the world. So for us to really build a society, I guess on the one hand is to encourage each one of us just to, I would say, open our eyes a little bit and say, it is not about a physical, I know Cassey, that's the only way mentoring kind of happens, but it's more that there's all these resources that are available, whether TED, Google, podcasts, where there's so many resources that are available, and people that are willing to share their kind of experiences. I love the work that Carol Dweck has done around growth mindset. And I think for us to really evolve as a nation, we do need to have a growth mindset. And my kind of view on it, because like I said, I'm more of a nurture rather than nature, is that it doesn't matter where you start, because we can all start in different positions. It's whether do we have the right mindset to learn to look at other people, interact with other people. And if we were just a little bit more conscious about how we spend our time, we can really make a significant movement. So mentoring offers that opportunity. And I learn a lot from my colleagues, from my team. I'm constantly a sponge because of they've all got different experiences. And I think we have to all become sponges, and then we can start to make some progress.
Guys, thank you so much for your introductory remarks about the power of mentorship. We're going to transition now. And Cassey, I'd like for you to set the stage. We literally have, when I look at the time, we've got about 40 minutes, okay? I'd like for you to give us 5 to 10 minutes of a clear snapshot of what we're dealing with in South Africa. Can we do that?
Absolutely. I could talk for hours on mental health, but I'm definitely going to stick to the 5 to 10 minutes. I've prepared a few slides, which I just wanted to show so that if anyone wants to screenshot or take on these information and these stats, because I know that will be a lot of information, you're welcome to. I'm also going to be sharing these slides, which have a lot more resources that people can also refer to and use. But I just really wanted to kind of paint the picture and set the tone for what does mental health look like in South Africa. And I'm sure a lot of us have been hearing it on the press, people talking about it. We're even using it in our day-to-day explanation about what is, I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed or burnt out or depressed. And what does this all mean, and how do we use this every day, not only for ourselves, but in our workplaces, our families, our friends. It's so much bigger than just what happens to other people. So please do bear with me. Mental health is a general state of mind and well-being. It's what all of us have. And it's something we should all be focusing on every day, is spending some time. And there's a lot of research that says even if you spend up to 3 minutes a day focusing on your mental health, it can have a huge impact. So all of us have mental health or mental wellness that we should be looking after just as much as we look after our physical body. Mental illness is a whole body illness that affects the way that you think, the way that you feel, the way that you behave, act, talk. It changes the chemicals in your body. And when we look at South Africa, as you mentioned earlier, Timothy, there are 1 in 3 South Africans that will or do have a mental illness at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 3 isn't something that happens outside of your home to other people far away. 1 in 3 is within your household. It's within your teams. It's within your friend circle. It's a lot more people than what we initially envisioned. An important way that we should look and frame mental health, and this is something that me myself, being with SADAG for over 15 years, we're constantly learning and adjusting and changing how we see mental health, is that it's still very stigmatized in South Africa. And a lot of that has to be the way we talk about mental health. I'm sure we've all heard, this person was released from hospital, this person committed suicide, this person suffers, or that person is depression, or that's a schizophrenic or a crazy. And often in the movies, unfortunately, mental health is portrayed a certain way. It's often as the person in a straitjacket, in a loony bin, who's in the corner kind of shaking. And that's not the case. People with the mental health issue could be the person that you sit across from your desk. It could be the person that you stand in the shopping queue with. And I think one of the ways we break that stigma around mental health is how we talk about it. So it's not a schizo, or there's a schizophrenic. We don't say, oh, there's a cancer. There's a canceric person. No, there is a person who has schizophrenia. There is a person who has diabetes. We've often also heard people say, oh, I'm so depressed today, or oh, I just want to kill myself. And we often use these words in quite slang language, but they could be really serious. We don't ever joke about cancer or say things like, oh, just snap out of it, it's diabetes. But yet for someone who has depression or anxiety, we say, think positively, snap out of it and get over it. And I think it's really important that we learn to change the way we talk about mental health in order to see those differences in our everyday approach to mental health. So here it comes to a bit of the stats. At SADAG, we run a 23 helpline call center where we provide free telephone counseling. And before lockdown, we were getting about 600 calls a day from people around the country, from all shapes and sizes, different races, ages, genders, religions. And 600 is quite a lot. We also know that before lockdown, 1 in 3 South Africans have a mental health issue. Quite significant for a lot of us who work at NPOs or corporates or from different teams and departments. 1 in 4 employees have depression. Depression can affect absenteeism, so people take more time off from work if they have depression or a mental health issue, and on average it can be about 18 days off a year just because of their depression. But also there's this issue of presenteeism, where you're at work, you're at your desk physically, but you're not as productive because of your untreated or undiagnosed depression. Not able to concentrate, multitask, make decisions quickly, so your performance is impacted as well. The scary thing in South Africa is that only 1 in 10 people with a mental illness have access to treatment. And this is why for SADAG, it's a huge advocacy project to try to encourage more people to get help, but also make sure we have more resources available. There are 23 suicides per day in the country and a further 460 attempted suicides every single day. Then we've hit lockdown. In March last year, for the very first time, this whole country went into what we thought was going to be a 3-week lockdown. We're now in our 3rd wave, and with the recent announcement just a few days ago of alert level 4, we've dealt with so many changes and so much uncertainty and fear and anxiety over the last 12 to 18 months. Since the lockdown last year, we're now receiving well over 1,500 calls per day. So our call volumes have more than doubled overnight. We've done a lot of different research and surveys. We want to really get an understanding of how many South Africans are impacted by mental health because of the lockdown and all the different psychosocial issues that are happening. 2/3 of NPO staff, so NPOs, NGOs, community organizations, exhibit or have moderate to severe psychological distress. 35% of employees are experiencing a high incidence of stress-related physical health. Just since last March, we've received over 500,000 calls to the SADAG helpline, and sadly over 100,000 to the suicide helpline. I think one of the things I really want to stress, and especially on the topic of mentorship, is that these are lots of big numbers. We know that affects a lot more people, so many different sectors. Mental health does not discriminate. It can affect anyone, anytime, anywhere. But these figures and stats are not just numbers that we throw out. These are people. These are stories, these are voices, these are people that we know. These could be us. And I think it's really important when we talk about these numbers, it's good for a snapshot and for us to understand the enormity of it. But I think it impacts a lot more of us every single day. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you so much, Casey. You know, as you're speaking, I was thinking about the beginning of lockdown last year. My entire family is in another country. I've written 5 books on human behavior, but I found myself dipping. You know, I have a lovely apartment that's facing the city. So I didn't have a garden, so I wasn't able to go out and experience nature. And as I started to slip, I really had to draw on the best insights. And like Tswelo was saying earlier about listening to podcasts, and when I could go out for grocery, essentially shopping, I'd go out and try to get some sun. Because as you said, no one is exempt from this. And before we go into Tswelo's thought about how to create an environment for people to thrive and be able to tackle their mental health challenges, if someone is listening and they think they may be facing a mental health challenge, Casey, how do they know?
And I think exactly what you mentioned, you know, I think for a lot of people, we're still navigating this pandemic and we've gone through a roller coaster of emotions. And some days we're good and we're prepared and we feel stronger. But there are some days where we're so tired and we're burnt out and kind of have that COVID fatigue from online meetings, adjusting, all of these different things. And often we find that our cup is empty and it's very difficult to pour from an empty cup. Which I know Tswelo is going to, just unpack and talk about. I think a quick rule of thumb is if you've noticed any physical changes in your sleeping patterns, your eating patterns, an impact on your daily functioning. A really simple thing that we often do in our call center when we're speaking to people on the phone is if you had to rate from 1 to 10, 10 being really happy, on top of the world, feeling really good, to 1 feeling really low, can't get out of bed, have no hope, no motivation. Where are you sitting? And I think we have to do this mental health check-in regularly to see where are we today? Where are we right now? Some days we have to do these check-ins regularly. It's also good to teach people around us how to do this check-in. The biggest thing that we've been trying to really get across during COVID and during lockdown is it's okay not to be okay. It's important to reach out and to talk to someone and to get help and know that you're not alone. I think this is why it's so great to have this types of conversation, is to bring mental health forward, let people be more open to the topic and to the idea for themselves or a friend, and to reach out for help and resources.
Thank you so much. I want to continue to encourage everyone to send in your questions. I see we've got a couple questions. We will be answering those questions at the end. Now we want to shift to Tswelo. But even before Discovery, I mean, you've got a vast history of working to helping optimize and liberate people's potential. So we want to hear from you now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. So if I think a little bit about, I guess, mental health in the workplace, and I think for Discovery, our fundamental guiding North Star, if I put it like that, is our purpose, making people healthier, and protecting and keeping their lives safe. So that is the starting point of our journey. So I just want to, I've got 1 or 2 slides that I'd like to kind of go through in positioning this. So if we then think about, there's a kind of a question that we'd have around what is a healthy work environment and what does it look like? And Casey touched a bit on, and yourself, Tim, also on kind of the journey that we've been on. So, what COVID has done is just highlighted so many challenges, right, that we see. Mental health has become extremely topical now. And by the way, when COVID happened, one thing I like to say to people is that there was no playbook of how we're going to go about managing COVID in organizations. I mean, it was just thrust pretty much upon us. We had to think a little bit about what do we do. Certainly, if you look at the slide and you read some of the articles, kind of commentary and headlines, one thing that's for certain is that we are learning. We don't have a playbook, and it's quite a challenge that we need to figure it out. But one of the things that's actually come to the fore with COVID, and I'm actually very grateful for it, is that it has fundamentally challenged organization to bring humanity back into organization. At the end of the day, we are people. That's what it is. So we've seen this significant shift towards humaneness, towards human centricity, people rethinking their own contracts with themselves and with organizations, and starting to put quite strict barriers in what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. We've seen some organizations, I think a couple of weeks back, I saw kind of a headline of a CEO of an American bank saying people must come back. And in my head, I was like, I don't think this is gonna last that long, because you're not the one who's gonna decide whether people are gonna come back. They're gonna decide whether is their safety, are their anxiety levels low, and whether will they come back into the organization. So I watched that with interest, because I think the power fundamentally has shifted, and I think it needed to, because it is at the end of the day, about people. But what is it about people that's important? They're not mutually exclusive, right? So when organizations create an environment where people, are in the right frame of mind, in the right space, what you have is productivity. It's going after audacious goals. You got very much deep connection, because at the end of the day, for me, I always say, when the business of people, businesses is about people. So those deep connections, we spend so much time together that people long, and they can play a very big role. You got increased levels of commitment, and at the same time, as you have that, people will be in a healthier state. Will have improved well-being. But achieving that, what it then leads to is directly a positive impact on organizations, right? In terms of direct impact, in terms of higher performance, higher productivity, reduced absenteeism, significantly increased growth in terms of turnover, highly engaged, highly motivated people doing a heck of a lot more. And as such, then your employees becomes also advocates for your organization. So for me, it becomes extremely critical that we do create organizations that are healthy and that will foster for this environment. But for that to happen, we got to start. If you can go to the next slide. For that to happen, we need to start with the notion of psychological safety, right? And this is absolutely critical for me. And then Cassey touched a little bit, let's say, on aspects of that. Definitely it's not a fix-all, but we got to start with psychological safety. And Amy Edmonston, professor of Harvard, coined psychological safety as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, concerns, mistakes, and the like. And I guess the question is, how many organizations or how many leaders or how many people are conscious about creating psychological safety so that a real conversation takes place in the environment, right? And I think, and I think not a lot of that happens. I've worked for organizations where people were extremely scared, extremely scared. This morning, actually, I was listening to a podcast, and one of the comments on that podcast, they were just talking about a story of people training to be air traffic control, and this lady was now thrust into a real situation where she had to let the planes land. The one plane was on top of the other, and because of the way they had been trained and it was all about fear, she got the planes muddled up and she made the top plane to drop instead of the bottom plane to drop. Had that happened, it would have been a catastrophic accident. People would have died. But the reason that actually she got muddled up is because in the training, in the environment, it was all about fear. So you can imagine the amount of anxiety that she was experiencing. So Amy talks a bit about this, and it's been identified, through kind of Google and as a TED Talk around the key ingredient for high performing teams, organization is this psychological safety. We know that at times mental health can be genetic or hereditary. However, we also know that in work examples, there is plenty giving of stress, giving of anxiety, because we spend a lot of time in these environments, and we know at times people are leaders and other people are the ones that kind of transfer this amount of stress and anxiety. So I guess for me, the question then is, firstly, we got to think as leaders, what is my leadership style? What is my leadership contribution to creating psychological safety? As a leader, Tim, you spoke about it, and I've experienced it myself, that during hard lockdown, how do I show up well? And for me to show up well, I've got to be healthy. The only thing is I'm very conscious about it. And I'm lucky that my team and we speak a lot about it. So I get a lot of energy from them. And by the way, because I lead that way, it allows me to also create an environment. I run, for example, these round tables. And over the last couple of months, I've been asking a simple question in my round tables. And the simple question is, how are you today? That's what I start the question with. How are you? And then I'll go and say, this is how I am. This is what's happening in my space. Physically, I'm okay, but emotionally, I'm not okay for these reasons. And it is the power of just a simple question and what you get from people. I've found it extremely amazing and extremely powerful because it's opened up such a rich dialogue that at times I've had people a bit like kind of Tim living in an apartment type setup that you were talking about. I've had people kind of say, I'm alone, and I'm struggling being alone. From there, we've then created with the teams check-ins that we will check in on a Monday, we will check in on a Wednesday, and our check-in are not based on any agenda. Again, when we check in, it's as simple as how was the weekend and how's the week going, what's happening, and it goes everywhere. It talks about kids, it talks about opportunities, it talks about some of us have been actually infected, as in we did experience COVID. So we talk about that and how you're navigating those. So all of that has been extremely, powerful. So maybe the last point I'd make here is that we have to provide the real support, for our employees. And in providing that real support, partnering with the likes of Cassey, SADAG, looking at this, there's a plethora of great capabilities, great apps. It's funny, one of those that I found on LinkedIn, Calm was running a promotion. So I subscribed to Calm, and to make sure that I sleep well, because sleeping is also an important ingredient to one's mental well-being. Every night I'm now creating these habits or rituals of switching off from media at a point in time, meditating or listening to a story on Calm. And I find that when I do that, I wake up much more refreshed. And when I wake up refreshed, I engage, in a different environment. So just the last slide, last thoughts on this one as I wrap up, is just to shift towards, creating of this, a healthier environment. I would say, firstly, leaders, we set the tone. I spoke about the growth mindset, and I really believe in it. I mean, if I share my story, I'm not the brightest of people. I didn't start off in, there are people that also at the time kind of condemned me to say I wouldn't amount to much. but if I believe them, I wouldn't be here. But because I didn't believe, because I read about nurture, growth mindset is extremely important. So as leaders, I think we need to watch what we say, and we need to also watch what we do, how we go about doing it. We must understand that contradictions erode trust. And we must also understand that it's important to lead from the front. Vulnerability, we need to give people the permission. And the way to give people the permission around psychological safety, it actually starts with the leader. It doesn't start with anybody else. It starts with me as a leader asking for feedback, soliciting feedback, and acting on that feedback. So that's one part. What's a leadership ask? The second one is around teams, in terms of team members. I think what's important in terms of team members, similarly, it's about growth mindset. It's about having the courage, I'd argue, having the courage, then the care to engage constructively and positively with everybody else. And with these things, they're not the finished article, so we're going to iterate. And for example, in Discovery at the moment, we talk about navigating COVID. It's a big experimentation for us. We iterate. We didn't have a playbook, and it's okay. Because what we do, some things work extremely well, we amplify them, we go mad. Some things don't work, we ditch them very quickly. And it's okay to ditch. That's what iteration is about. And as teams, there's some things that you will do that will work, go mad on those ones. There's some things that will not work. Ditch them, it's okay, go try something else. So be open to the the whole iteration process and approach. And then the last one, I guess, for organizations, for me, it's about how do organizations put mental well-being squarely at the center. If we don't have healthy people, you're not going to have successful, healthy organization. It is as simple as that. When somebody is ill, they're not going to put their best foot forward. So for me, it is in my interest to make sure that the environment we constantly create, and when I say environment, it can start at a small T level, right? Small team level. The people that I surround myself, if I create the right environment and they bring the all, it makes it easier then that performance will come through. And obviously that's kind of what we want. We want performance to come through. We also got to partner with communities and make sure we're learning and giving out to communities and bringing in from the communities. And this is what the team and I have kind of been doing on this whole week. It's been kind of reaching out and engaging with different partners to kind of make an impact. And I guess the last thought is that it is but a journey. It's all about learning. And it's okay. And the journey will get to the destination over time. And we just need to be patient with ourselves and be caring to ourselves. And Tim, those are just the thoughts that I would have about what as organizations we need to think about.
Thank you so much, Tswelo. I really appreciate how you've structured this conversation in giving format and the fundamentals of how an organization can position themselves to help their people thrive. I just have one question for you about the presentation. If you see that a colleague, and this is a high-performing colleague, this is a person who has a lot of pride, maybe even a little bit of ego. If you see them struggling and you can see them dipping a bit, but they're in denial about it, how would you approach them?
Oh, Tim, I mean, that's a good question. So I guess for me, I care enough. Firstly, I get the point I'm making is that I care so much for my colleagues that I lead through engagement. So, I mean, as I've said to you, I've got my own struggles. I'm not sitting here kind of with a life that's all good. I mean, my own partner is suffering with mental challenges, and I've been forced in a very short period of time to be a single parent. And a lot of my colleagues will know that. And what the point I make is that as you open yourself up and you genuinely care and you share, you invite the other person to open up and share. And what's important at the moment, there's kind of a word that I like to use, which is whenever I'm working with my team, especially people, I build relationships, and I use this word. We must be committed to each other's success.
Wow.
And being committed to each other's success, it means it's both in when things are fantastic and you can be the best version of yourself, and also it's when you are struggling, that I need to put my hand on your shoulder and invite you to say, I am walking with you. Because of the day, it gives me, go back to my purpose, liberating the potential in people. So if I'm to liberate your potential, I can't let you kind of destroy yourself or let you kind of go on a path that may lead to you not realizing your potential. So we got to care. It's not easy and it's not a formula, Tim. It depends. I use energy a lot. Sometimes, people give me energy, I give energy back. Sometimes people reciprocate. I think there's so many different things that you would try. But I think the key one is being open and leading through vulnerability.
Thank you very much. We've got about 9 minutes left. As we wrap up this conversation, I'd like to come back to you, Cassey. Firstly, I want to tell your volunteers, I said thank you, and thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing. But how does one volunteer?
Thank you for that, and thanks for the question as well. Being an NPO, and I saw it in one of the questions with the lack of resources, we have amazing people that volunteer their time. They do 4 hours a week, and they'll come and help us on the lines. And our volunteers don't have to be psychologists or psychiatrists. They're also real people. And I think that also talks a little bit, Philo, about what you're talking about, the fundamentals of just being human and being kind and speaking to another person who can connect. And so for our volunteers, we have more information on how to volunteer at SADAG. We do provide training and mentorship and support. And you can find all the information on how to volunteer at our website, sadag.org. And we look forward to it. We couldn't do what we do without the amazing team of volunteers who selflessly give to help others. So yes, please, the more volunteers, the better.
Thank you. The questions are starting to flow in. Tswelo, people want to know, how can NPOs, schools, introduce this sort of round table concept into their organizations?
Tim, every time I kind of smile because we, as people, we think these things are very complex kind of thoughts, and actually they're very, very simple. Because all I did, it was just, and I just want to start there, all I did was just working with my PA. I just invite random people from my team to, whether it's 10 or 12 or 14 people. And I articulated a little bit to say, this is a safe environment. This is a conversation. There's no hierarchy about it. I'm interested in bringing the water cooler conversation into the space. And as I say, then I start and lead with it by just sharing my thoughts in terms of where I'm at, and then inviting others to share thoughts. So to introduce it, I think it is not about tackling it at a macro, for example, this is not a discovery thing. Actually, I didn't introduce it. It's not they call it for discovery.
Yes.
Something that's about me trying to stay connected to different people within the organization. And the best way to stay connected for me was through just a virtual, or before COVID, it was a physical roundtable that I would invite people, and some would pitch, and some would just sit there and not say much. But what I find was that as the conversation starts, over time, people get relaxed and people share from their heart. And then it's amazing when that happens, it invokes other people to do the same. So my point is, start small. I think don't wait for the organization. As a leader, if you think it's something that resonates with you, you want to create dialogue, just invite people around the table and say, let's have that dialogue. And there's nothing, it doesn't have to be anything topical. It's not that structured.
Guys, I want to, we've got another question about how do leaders get mentored for psychological safety. Before we answer that, I want to talk a little bit about hacking mental health and really thriving at your highest level. And I'm going to share a couple of things that I've done, and I'd like for you guys to share a couple of things that you've done. So one of the things that I've done to boost my mental health, during lockdown is I've spent a little bit more time in nature. I found gardens, I found parks. And based on science, what nature does is supercharges your immune system. So spending more time in nature in a park where you can be safe helped me boost my immune system to be able to tackle sickness, to be able to give my brain more creative power. This has been one of the things. And the other thing I've done is I've reached out to friends to create, as you mentioned, Tswelo, these systems where we check on each other and we reach out to each other, and I say yes to a lot of things. So for example, if I see a friend of mine is having a birthday party on Zoom, I'll pop in, even if I'm busy, just to show them that I care. And if I'm busy, I'll just tell them straight up, I only have 5 minutes, but I wanted to come in and show you love on your birthday. These are some of the hacks that have helped me energize myself to thrive in some of these tough times. What are some of your hacks, guys?
I'll go first, Tswelo.
Okay.
I think for me is to actively have a go-to list of things that I could try to do and actively work on it every single day. Often, when you add it on your to-do list, you get to it at the end of the day, and by then you're so tired and exhausted. So really changing the mindset every morning. One of the things that I do for my team, and we have a million WhatsApp groups with everyone, is finding a quote that resonates with me for the day to motivate or inspire. I do it to inspire the team, but actually I'm inspiring myself and setting that mindset for the day, and doing different things, whether it be picking music that really gets me motivated. So finding happy songs and listening to a podcast. I think it's just actively making a list of go-to things to do, so that I don't have to sit and try to figure it out. I've got a list I can go to, I can try. Not by trying to help other people, I'm actually helping myself. So that's some of my hacks.
I love that. Tswelo?
Yeah, Tim, I think it's a bit like yours. So you sort of say kind of go to nature. And what I do is that physical exercise is something that I'm very conscious about, and I do. And it does exactly what you were describing. It's amazing when I'm out running in different suburbs around Joburg. You're bringing in your kind of fresh air, you're getting different stimulation, seeing different people. And I find running is quite a leveler, by the way, because you're meeting people from a whole lot of different walks of life. So that's one part that has helped me a lot, actually, to let's say during this period. And then the other one that, I guess Cassey has kind of alluded to, is around, and I've alluded to, is around at the moment, I'm into these different podcasts, these things that just increases your capacity, if I put it like that, they're just at your fingertips. They're not costing you anything, but you can do a lot, let's say with them. And then the last one, I guess, is it's WhatsApp groups that I kind of belong with. Then they're all different again. It's funny, there isn't anything in particular. So I've got a whiskey kind of social WhatsApp group where what they discuss, what they do is very different to another one from where I was at school and what the guys are doing it. And Tim, it's exactly what you're describing, that all of these different stimulation, they just help just to keep me kind of conscious in kind of what's going on.
Guys, as we wrap this conversation in the last couple of minutes, first of all, I just want to say thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you guys for being human at the end of the day. Thank you for being people who are, your title did not get in the way. As directors and CEOs, you showed your heart, and that means a lot to me, and I'm sure everyone listening. We're really looking forward to the next session where they're going to be speaking about fundraising in this complex environment. You got Nikki Griffiths coming up, Firoze Bhorat, hosted by my man, Rush Mamabolo, the man himself. But I want to give you guys 30 seconds to close this out. Cassey, any final comments in 30 seconds? And then when I come to you, Tswelo, I'd like you to answer that final question. How can leaders be mentored to be able to position themselves for psychological safety? Cassey?
Just thank you so much for inviting me on the platform to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, not only for myself, but for the work that we do. I think my last message would be, and it's something I've said over and over again over the last year, is that we might be all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats. And if we can just remember to be human and to be kind, but to ourselves as well as to other people around us, And if you're ever wanting more information, please reach out to SADAG. We'd love to connect and engage. And just to everyone else, enjoy the rest of the session. It's a really great way to start the day. So thank you everyone for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Casey. And I really wish you guys the best. And Tswelo, take us home.
So how can leaders be mentored? Answering that question, Tim. I think the first piece for me that I would so say is, I think, firstly, read a lot. I think when people just need to go read, find out, there's a lot of information, papers, studies written about psychological safety. I would start there so that I get to understand what is the concept about, what does it mean, what are the opportunities, and some of it we touched a little bit. And people can check out Amy's work, I guess, as a starting point, just to understand what is that it's alluding to. Then the second point, I would say that I think it starts with you. So before you start thinking about psychological safety at a macro level, as a leader, I think you got to start experimenting in your own environment with your own teams. And it's not just about teams at work, by the way. Here's an interesting question. If you are a parent, are you creating psychological safety in your home? Do your kids, do your family members have the comfort and courage to be themselves, to give you feedback and to engage? So this notion for me is not just a corporate notion. It's actually about humanity. It's about living, right? So I would then start there, think a little bit about what's happening in your environment and what is that you do. And then I guess the last point is that if you then started to play with it and started to feel comfortable, then you need to be the advocate. Then you need to lead by be role modeling, that people must see you do it. The more people see you do it and see that in your little environment is thriving, they will seek you out, and then this thing starts to spread a bit like wildfire. I'm much more in that, let's say, type of space. And then, maybe then just a last thought, look at other people. If there's other people that you see are doing it well, reach out to them. Ask them, engage with them, what is kind of going on, and that will help. And sorry, Tim, again, just one last thought is this. It's feedback. Your people they can help you on that journey by asking the question, am I creating the environment? So that's just some thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Tswelo. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Roche, good luck. You following this enormous tyrant. It's like trying to follow Nelson Mandela after his big speech, or Martin Luther King. I have a dream. Who's up next? Roche, good luck, my friend. Thank you guys very much for your questions, and we look forward to Firoze, Nikki, thank you guys. Good luck on the next session. Cheers.
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for such an amazing panelist, Tswelo Kodisang and Cassey Chambers, for such a very insightful and an important session. And I think especially, given what we find ourselves in level 4, people losing jobs, livelihoods. So thanks for I like how do you hack the mental health and spending time in nature, reading books, podcasts, and also gym, and quite amazing. Thanks for that. Now we are shifting gears from mental health, and we are going to talk about numbers, about financial health. My name is Rosh Mamabolo. I'm very delighted to be here. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an academic. I consider myself a social entrepreneur activist. I'm an accountant by profession, unfortunately. I hold a MBA in finance and a PhD in entrepreneurship. So it's the entrepreneurship space, the numbers is what I'm very passionate about. Welcome to Mentorship with a Purpose, brought to you by Discovery. I'll be a host for the next 2 sessions today. And we'll start with fundraising for growth, and then later on, after an hour or so, we'll have a masterclass preparing your business for funding. Well, like I said, we live in such uncertain times. We woke up on Sunday to level 4 lockdown regulations. which means that most businesses, except if you're of course in the pharmaceutical industry, it means that you are shutting down, loss of revenue, loss of jobs. As an entrepreneur running an organization in this uncharted different waters, how do you position your business for fundraising, for growth, when most businesses, when most economies are contracting? So to unpack this and to answer some of these most difficult financial questions regarding how to raise funding for growth, I am joined by Mr. Firoze, Bhorat and Ms. Nikki Griffiths. But before I introduce them and get into the session, let me outline the structure of the session. So we have an hour. We should wrap up the discussion around 12 o'clock. And so I'll give my panelists some time to share their opening thoughts on the topic, and then I will start the discussion with some of the leading questions, and maybe for about 10-15 minutes or so, and then I'll open the floor, the digital floor, to your questions. So feel free to throw in questions, comments. Feel free to share your experiences as well, and we'll read them out and I'll pose those questions. And just use the chat functionality that you have. Now let me introduce our esteemed panelists. I will start with Nikki Griffiths. Nikki is the Chief Operating Officer of Tshikululu Social Investment. In 2020, the Tshikululu Social Investment team was responsible for disbursement of over 650 million, right? Over 650 million into social development projects throughout South Africa. So Nikki pretty much knows how to invest in social enterprises. So if you are out there and you want to be able to raise funding, you really want to listen up to what Nikki has to offer. She's a member of the Tshikululu Executive Committee, and she plays a key role in the implementation and execution of the company's strategy. Nikki has over 15 years experience in social investment and has worked with almost every client at Tshikululu. Her expertise ranges from social investment strategies to designing and implementing the operating models that support these strategies. Her original training and prior experience as a journalist in South Africa has given Nikki a real-world understanding of socio-economic conditions relating to South Africa. She holds a Bachelor of Journalism and also an MBA. Thanks and welcome, Nikki. Your thoughts?
Yeah, if I reflect on my life, I've been really lucky in that I've had incredible bosses. I've worked for people that are brilliant at what they do, but also have that human part to them, and have shown vulnerability and shared their struggles. And so if I had to look at my career, I think I've been really lucky to have those type of people in my life. To what Firoze says, sometimes they're really hard on you. I remember the first time I got feedback from my first boss, fresh out of university, and he had corrected all my work with a red pen. And I thought, oh my gosh, I will never be able to write a press release in my life. Let's just fix this, move this, find a better word. And when you come out of school, you see that as a negative. Some things either have to be right or wrong, and it's completely opposite in your professional development. And you realize what a gift it is to have a boss or to have colleagues that will take time to give you that feedback, that will take 10 or 20 minutes to look at your work and give you feedback. And so from a professional point of view, I've been very lucky to have people in my life that are willing to give feedback and who in their own lives are willing to share what they're doing and to be vulnerable. And then I think kind of the older I've got, I've started to realize that I've grown up with really brilliant people. And increasingly I can look at friends or ex-colleagues or people I went to university with, and I have a moment and I think, wow, you're brilliant. You're not just the person I shared a lecture hall with or a beer with. So I think mentorship comes from different parts in your life. And you just have a way, I think to Firoze's point, you're often just lucky that you have the right person in your life at the right time to teach the right lesson. And I think that's what's exciting, is that you can never stop learning and looking for those people that keep popping up. Yeah, so what I wanted to talk about today is I come very much, Tshikululu, we are a social investor, and so I come very much from the social sector. And when I saw the fundraising for entrepreneurship, I thought, you've got the wrong person, but I was assured that I can give my insights from the social sector. And when I was thinking about it, a lot of it does relate to a more commercial environment. And I think you can replace funders with the word investors, and you can replace the word beneficiary organizations or individuals with clients. I think there's a lot of synergy between the two sectors, and often people like to use different words, and we're talking about exactly the same thing. And so a lot of the words I use are from my world, from the social investment sector, but I just, I think that they apply equally in a commercial sector. The first thing about, how do you fundraise for growth in a social investment sector? I think the first thing to think about is that this is a long game, and we all need to raise funds, whether we are an NGO, whether we are a business. We all need people that are investors that are willing to invest in our idea and our vision and our activities. And the first thing is just to take the time to research. It is about finding the funder or the investor that shares your vision. And so the first thing that I would say is it's about finding the right fit, the right match. And if you are looking for funding, is to take the time to see who is out there. And the last thing you want is to build a relationship with a funder or a client that doesn't share your value or your vision, because the relationship will be rocky and it won't work. And so my first suggestion is that you take the time researching. You find funders that are funding in your particular area, that they have a track record in your area, and there are different places to look for funding. So there's obviously corporate social investment fund, there's philanthropists, there's international funders, there's international giving, there's crowdfunding. So you first have to find the type of funder you're looking for, and then you need to see where are those funds. And so we at Tshikululu, we see a lot of applications that come in and they don't even fit the call that was set out. And your heart breaks because you think this person or this organization put in so much time for this application, but from the first gate, you can't consider it. So really find a funder that shares your vision. The second one, and it's hard to admit, but it's exactly the same in business, fundraising never ends. Just like the search for the new client, the new sector, it never ends. And once you've secured funding, it's thinking about who else that you can build relationships with, who else do you want to meet and tell your story to, because especially in the social investment sector, there are very particular cycles. Increasingly, you can find funders that do multi-year funding between 3 to 5 years, which is fantastic. But people change and funders change, and you need to be thinking 2 or 3 years ahead and constantly building relationships, because relationships end, but in the same way, new relationships begin. And it's exactly the same when you're in a new business cycle. The first kind of new client you get is fantastic, but you've got to keep looking for the other clients. And actually through that activity, it keeps you relevant, it keeps you open to opportunities. And so the new fundraising, unfortunately, never ends. But with that, it brings opportunity and it brings a new energy into your organization. I think in the social sector, what is particularly interesting, but I also think it speaks to branding more generally now. And I think, Firoze said it, people want an authentic experience. They don't want to just spend money. They don't want to know that you are just chasing the bottom line. And it's very similar in the social sector, is that funders that are looking for organizations or individuals or visions or causes to invest in, they want to know the head and the heart of your story. So they want to know, are you governed well? Do you have best practice governance in place? Can you show us the numbers? Where are your audited financial statements? Where are your board meetings? How are your delegation of authorities in your organization? And it's really sometimes quite hard stuff. I think, especially for purpose-driven organizations, they're like, but, this is our purpose, and we are educating learners who don't have access to that type of opportunity. And in the same way that the funders want to know your vision and your story and why you exist, they also want to know the head part, that you can run a world-class organization that is executing on your purpose. And so I think the challenge for organizations that are looking for funding is that there is two sides to your story, and that you must be able to seamlessly talk about your excellence in execution and the passion of why you are here every day and why you get up and you execute on the purpose that drives your organization. The fourth one, and I've got to laugh because it comes up in everything, but it's so true, and it's not me, I'm an art student, but data. We are in the world where people want data, and whether it's data to support your heart story. People want to know how many lives have you impacted, how have you impacted people, how do you verify that data, how do you know that you changed somebody's life, how do you know that the intervention that you're running or the place where you're putting your energy and your money is going to make a difference. And increasingly, funders want to see the data that supports your story, that supports your track record. And I think this has been a fundamental change for the social sector over the last 5 to 8 years. A lot of it was accelerated by the PEPFAR funding from the US, where to get US funding into your organization, you have to demonstrate the ability to track impact, to track the numbers, and not just have the connections and the strategy. I also think you need the data to demonstrate, like I was saying earlier, the head part of your organization. Do you know how your cash flow? Do you know your income, your expenses? Can you tell a funder how your sustainability is going? And so, the data just cuts across everything. And to raise funds, you need to have access to it, and it needs to be verifiable. And then even more so, what we are realizing is that, and very similar to what Firoze said, what's important to your client. And you need to also understand what's important to your funder, because not all money is the same. And it comes with different requirements, different reporting requirements. Some of the funding, the most free funding you'll ever get is from an individual who is giving you money because they identify with your values. But that is not the main source of funding. And if you get funding from a corporate funder or from an international funder, they have somebody else that they've got to answer to. And so you need to understand, when you take that investment or you take that funding, what is the funder going to ask me in a year's time? Are they going to ask me for my BE reporting, where I need the ID numbers of all my beneficiaries? Are they going to ask me for my tax exemption certificate so they can submit it with their tax submission? And so my advice is, when you do fundraise and you actually do secure an investment, you need to ask them fundamental questions of where the money is coming from, and can you meet all those reporting requirements? What we're seeing is, because of this, and I think it's a really good move around accountability, transparency, all of us want to know where money goes, whether it's from the state or whether it's from a private funder. If you accept money, you've got to know what you're accepting, and you've got to be willing to report it. And what we're seeing increasingly in our sector that wasn't there 10 years ago is that people will send auditors to your organization. If you have taken money and not taken money, if you've taken an investment or you've received funding, if it is really significant, I promise you, in a year or 18 months' time, you're going to get a phone call and it's going to say, "Hi, we're really happy with how things are going. Our internal audit department's arriving in 2 weeks' time. Could you get the records out?" And it's not a case of that they don't trust you, but for their own stakeholders, they need to say, "Listen, we know where this money went. We verified it, and here it is." And so my kind of thing is, whatever money you accept, you accept it in its entirety, and you must be willing to report on it, and you must be willing to know what matters to your funder. And then the ability, and I think this actually applies in all spheres of life, is the ability to learn and to stay relevant. And if the context is changing, you have to have the ability to change. And you may always hold on to your core vision or the reason why you exist, but you have to be able to demonstrate to anyone, actually all your stakeholders, that you're willing to learn, you're willing to research, read, go out into the environments in which you're doing work, listen to your beneficiaries, and continually adapt your model, because relevancy is the most important currency. You need to demonstrate that you are changing with the world, and that you are willing to evolve your model to increase your impact according to what's happening around you. And then I think the main thing and I think this is the hardest thing for organizations or people that are looking for funding, is how do you remain true to your purpose and to your values? Because, a lot of funders will try encourage you to do something different, or you might be tempted to do something different because you want the funding. And how do you hold on to that authenticity and to what makes you who you are? And I think that is the hardest part for organizations that are looking for funding, is to remain true, but also to meet the funder halfway. And so my main point is, how do you develop a relationship that is not transactional, but that is transformational, and that you develop a partnership with your funder in that you become partners on the journey through the good and the bad. The last thing you want is to get money from a funder that doesn't want to be there when things get a little bit rocky. And all of us know life is not a straight line. But the incredible thing is when you find funders that are willing to do the journey with you, is that it transforms both your organization and the investor and the funder that has given you the money. And so as hard as it is, I think it's something that you've got to hold on to. And then my final point, and it's really what Rose was saying around positioning. I think positioning starts with an examination of who you are internally as an organization. And before you even put out a message or you try to differentiate yourself, I think you as an organization and as a leadership team, you need to know what you stand for and what your foundational values are, and that you live it every single day, so that if anybody meets anybody from your organization, there is no contradiction in terms of your positioning. And also, how do you treat your beneficiaries? Do you truly understand what they need? Do you take the time to have the conversations with the communities or the clients that you say that you're serving? And because I think your greatest advocates are your beneficiaries or your clients. They speak on your behalf. They are your ambassadors. They're authentic. They're not paid for. And I think when you get a message from people, from your stakeholders, and they are positioning you, I think there's nothing more powerful, especially for funders or investors. And I think, Rosh, those are they're in my presentation. I can send it on, but those are my key points, I think, around raising funds in the social sector.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the insightful presentation, Nikki. And we have about 15 minutes to wrap up this session. So I'm going to fire some couple of questions quickly to you and Firoze, and then I'm hoping that I have a couple of questions from the audience as well. Here are entrepreneurs. They approach Tshikululu, they want funding. They do ever so many things. Is it a problem to you, or do you want them to narrow down to focus on one specific thing?
I do think focus has a lot of value. Because it's to that point is that you need to know what the organization, the entrepreneur, or the individual is about. You want to know what is going to sustain them on the hard days, where it doesn't make sense to be doing what they're doing, or they're feeling a bit irrational, or there's a pandemic. Is this going to work? It's not going to work if there's no fundamental purpose, and I think that's why it is really important to know why the organization is there and what their purpose is, because it's that purpose and the identification of that purpose and that is going to sustain the leadership and is going to keep that organization going during tough times. So I do think it's a differentiator. I think if somebody says I can do anything and all things, I think we all know it. You kind of, jack of all trades, master of none. And it's the masters that attract the funders. And like I said, you know, if you can attract one or two good funders that share your purpose, it's more valuable than attracting 3 or 4 funders that don't understand you and might leave you the moment something gets tough.
Nikki, here's a question that I've always been wondering to myself. If I'm to sneak into your office or your investment committee after a year or 2 of you guys have received applications, what is that number one reason you reject applications? Because, you know, it's all well and good to say you need to have all these things, these are the tick boxes, but we never get to hear, and I'm quite curious, you know, whether it's a bank or anyone who does investment, to say, what is that one thing, you know, that you have seen over different applications that says deny? So what is that 1 or 2 reasons you deny applications?
So I think the first thing is always, there's never enough money. So there's always more applications than there is for money. So if you get rejected, you might have ticked every single box. And in the end, it's a competitive process where somebody else's, where another organization's application might have been better. I think, Rosh, there's very basic things that get applications kicked out. And I think the first one is when you get an application where the organization hasn't even read the request for proposals, you know, so you just think, but you didn't even take the time to find out what we wanted, you know, and it's a little bit almost, I don't know, insulting. You kind of, you know, and you think, but this was an application about early childhood development, you know, why are you applying for tertiary bursaries? So I think the first thing is, you know your funder. And write the application for your funder. Know what matters to your funder. And if you can't meet what matters to your funder, don't apply, because you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. I think the second thing, and I hate saying this, but I really learned this lesson in my experience, is you have to meet all the governance requirements. And it sounds so boring, but I think in the current global and local context, you have to have a tax clearance certificate. You have to be able to pull out your accounts. You know, to receive funding nowadays, you've got to have best practice governance. There's FICA, there's POPI now, there's international money laundering, there's SARS. You know, I just think you have to, and if that's not what drives you as the leader of an organization, find somebody who it does drive them and they love it and they do it, because, you know, in an application, we look at kind of the social due diligence. What is your vision? What is your track record? And will it make a difference in the current socio-economic context? Are you relevant? The next thing is, are you compliant? Do you have all your governance? You know, are your financials up to date? If somebody arrives and they've got financials that are 2 years old, everything else falls away, you know? And so I think my message is, it's the full package, and you need to have considered all of it in your funding application. And I think you had a great question in the brief where you kind of said, what would make a funding application different? And I think it's what everybody's looking for, is that nuance and the real world experience. Tell us the lessons you've learned, tell us the mistakes you've made, and tell us how, from those lessons or from your experience, how it changes your model and how it keeps you motivated. It's very easy to read something that's kind of fresh off Google or fresh out of a textbook, but you can never replace real world insight. And it links into the thought leadership point that Firoze said. Your insight matters. You have a view that nobody else has. And so in your application, share what you know, share what you've learned, because you occupy a very unique place, and we need to hear your voice, whether it's through an application or thought leadership. be who you are, because you have something valuable to contribute to the broader thinking and the broader sector.
Thanks for that. I mean, this is like getting married, right? I mean, you either go on Tinder or you go on a date and you get to know the person before you propose, right? So they need to do their research about, I mean, pretty much sounds like this is, applying for funding, getting funding. It's like a marriage. It's like, we need to get along. We need to know each other. We need to get along. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, Roshan, I think from your experience, don't you agree it's similar with entrepreneurs and investors? I mean, you don't want an investor that you're going to date, because, I mean, one bad date and the next thing they're looking for another company to put their funds in. I mean, you want an investor that you want to marry and is going to be with you for 5-10 years. So it's very similar. I think it just speaks to that point that, we want to build relationships in whichever area of your life, because you kind of want people there for you want the partner there for the best and the worst times. So it's a little bit like a marriage, and you do have to have your things in order before you go on the first date. But yeah, I think it's very similar with commercial investments as well.
Awesome, thanks. We have a question from the platform from Fumozo Mutani. It's addressed to you, Nikki, and basically it goes, how do you go about applying for funding at Tshikululu, and what are the requirements?
So I think the first thing is we manage funds on behalf of clients, and so they have very specific strategies and funding calls. So the first thing I would do is recommend someone goes to our website to see which of our clients are funding what and when the funding calls are. Or you could also drop an email to me, and if you want to have a chat about it. So Tshikululu, we don't give out our own money. We manage funding on behalf of clients that have very defined strategies.
Okay. Thank you. Given the situation that we find ourselves in globally, but specifically in South Africa, with regard to slow economic conditions, is it possible to raise funding? Nikki, do you have money available? Are the funds available for NGOs, for entrepreneurs?
Right, I think there are funds available. We saw funds become available in COVID-19 that we didn't even know existed. But I say that in a very cautionary way. I think COVID has heightened who's in the inner circle and who's in the outer circle. And I think organizations that have the networks already established before COVID are able to access funding. But I think just generally, I think it's really hard now. I think people who are marginalized are even more marginalized, and people who were in the inner circle are even more in the inner circle. And I mean it not just in South Africa, I mean kind of globally. I mean, reading that America has too many jobs and not enough people. I can't even intellectualize that. And so there are funds, but I do think it comes with a footnote. I think in the current environment, it's really hard to build new relationships, new networks. And we'll have to see what happens in kind of a post-COVID world.
Awesome. And how do we spell the organization, Nikki?
Tshikululu.
Thank you. On that spelling bee note, thank you so much. Firoze and Nikki, you guys are doing amazing work, and it's important, especially during this difficult time. We really appreciate you, and continue doing the amazing work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Bhorat. Thank you, Discovery.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And on that note, we are now, I know we are running slightly behind with our second or third rather session of the day. So what we'll now have is a masterclass on preparing your business for funding. So you've heard what Firoze has said and what Nikki has said. The funds are there. You just need to position your brand in a way that is attractive to funding. Now let's get into the session where we are now getting into how do we prepare your business for that funding? how do you raise funding for your business? What do funders look for when they review your funding application? Any tips on how to attract funding? Where to look for funding? I mean, we already know there's Tshikululu, but I'm sure there are other organizations as well. Our speaker to do the masterclass for about 20 minutes or so, and then I will engage her with some questions. And please also feel free to post your questions or comments, and let's fly away. Our speaker for the next session is Sylvia van Nieuwenhuizen, right? I needed to get that right. Sylvia van Nieuwenhuizen, and she'll be taking us through the masterclass. Sylvia has been in the banking industry for the past 33 years, pretty much doing about everything within the bank. Her core function within the environment for the past 10 years has been future cash flow projections, funding requirements, pricing various asset structures and interbank settlements, execution of bank strategies, implementation, and adhering to regulatory requirements. She also represents Discovery Bank on various industry forums, such as the Payment Association of South Africa, Reserve Bank forums, as well as Banking Association of South Africa. For the past 30 years, Sylvia has been a wife to Harry and a mom to Raina, and she's very passionate about family and supports a few charities such as Meals on Wheels and the Cancer Association. And she's a banker with a humane faith. Welcome, Sylvia. Looking forward to your session. Are you good?
All good, thank you, Rosh, and well done on pronouncing my very long surname. So thank you, and thank you for the opportunity that I can share this. And I think to the previous speakers, the people will see that a lot of what they've mentioned actually sort of interacts and covers a lot of the things that I'll be covering. And yes, I'm by no means an expert when it comes to funding. I'm merely guiding and giving some tips on how and what you need to do. And I mean, we'll take it from there. And if there's any questions that as you alluded to earlier, people can post the questions and we'll take it from there.
Awesome.
All right.
Before you start, Sylvia, what's your story, a short story on you being mentored? I mean, just give me a session of you were sitting with your mentor and he or she said something and it blew your mind away. What happened?
So, I mean, as I've mentioned, I've been in the banking industry for 33 years, right? So I joined the bank as a youngster. So I grew up in the bank. And I've had multiple mentors. And I think in one of the previous sessions, I think even in yesterday's session, they mentioned that sadly, a lot of my mentors has been men. And we don't really have women in leading or in leadership positions. So to me, I've had a lot of men guiding me through in the industry. And being in a treasury environment is really male dominated, and as a female you really need to stand up for yourself, and in instances like that I really had great bosses who guided me through my experience in the bank, and I'm grateful to that, to have led me where I am today, almost being in a deputy treasurer position within Discovery Bank. So and I think in our lives as well, you're fortunate for having dads or uncles, or even just people in your family that provided you with guidance and wisdom.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So you do the masterclass. When you're done, I'll start the conversation with some Q&A, and then we open up to the platform. And we go from there.
Fabulous. So let's hope my presentation will work. Right. So as Rosh alluded to, I'm talking about preparing your business for funding. So I just want to draw there's a slight difference between raising funds versus fundraising. So I just want to talk to that a bit, just to draw the distinction. So basically, when we talk about funding is where you are raising money for a specific project or for business purposes, and you're accountable to your shareholders, your stakeholders, your investors, your donors, everybody that basically invest money into your business. There's also a distinction within funding which is called capital, and that's your working capital, which allows you, to do your day-to-day business. So, and there's key funding requirements, and this is where Nikki really alluded to, from a regulatory perspective, there's been a lot of focus on governance and good governance within businesses. So not just businesses, even in NGOs, any type of business where you are deemed in a regulatory environment, you need to make sure that you report these or the funding that you receive, you need to report that appropriately. And under fundraising, I call that the fun part of raising money. And that is basically where you can engage with your communities, you can provide opportunities to your communities to basically invest into your business. And once again, as I said previously, a lot of the things I'll be talking to has been raised in the previous session, where you need to look in the right places and you need to source the funds from the correct or the companies that has a similar view as what you have from your business perspective. And then basically there are 6 steps basically that we can use to look at what you need as a foundation. So it's very important to have a goal. You need to know where you're going. You need to know what it is that you want to achieve. Based on what your goal is, you need to make sure that you have an appropriate plan. You need to know where you're going. It's like if you go mountaineering, you need to know how you're going to get to the top of that mountain. You need to plan it. It's not just a case that it's, just a brisk walk. There's obviously other challenges and obstacles that you need to consider. In your plan, costs is really important. You need to know what it is going to cost you. It's all good and well to raise funding, but you need to know what the cost implication could be on your business or on your plan. And we'll cover all these steps in a bit more broader detail later on. Then you need to have a timeline. It's no use you have a goal and you have a plan and you know what it's going to cost you. If you don't know what your timelines is, that could potentially negatively impact your business. You need to really make sure that you understand where you're going and what the time constraints possibly could be. And then once again, your sources. There are various companies or institutions or Nikki alluded to philanthropists. There's people that you can go to go and get funding. And yes, it may not be that easy, but you need to be able to jot down who your potential sources would be from as you go through your plan. And then evaluate. I think a lot of people underestimate evaluation when you have this entire goal or this entire process. Evaluation is not just at the end of the process. It's a continuation of each and every step. You need to know what you're evaluating. You need to know that if there's something that could potentially impact your business, what mitigating factors do you need to bring into the bigger scheme of things? Right, then the next, apologies, it seems like there's a delay. Oh, there we go. So when we look at goals, there's specific questions you need to ask yourself first before you actually start setting your goals. So firstly, this is about funding. You need to know obviously what you need to raise, what the amount is that you want to raise, and fundamentally you need to know what is your purpose. Is there a specific purpose that you require your funding for? Are there other multiple projects that you require funding for within a specific time span? If you have multiple purposes, then prioritize them. You cannot go and ask for funding and for everything, because it may not be effective, first of all, and you may have investors that may just turn their backs on you because they may find that you're trying to take too bigger risks, and they don't necessarily want to take the risk on your business. So go and prioritize them, and prioritize them from highest to lowest. And remember, this can change. It's not necessarily set in stone. And then one of the things that you need to really understand from a business perspective is you need to know what is your current budget. Within your budget, you need to know, what is your costs, and under costs you have your direct costs and your indirect costs. So your direct cost, as you can see on the slide, talks to your staff costs, which is your salaries, pensions, anything related to staff, possible travel expenses, equipment, supplies. I mean, this list can go long or can be very long, and this is just some of the common direct costs that would appear in a small business per se. Your indirect costs, that would obviously be your building or maintenance costs, insurance, utilities, cleaning services. And one of the other really important things that you need to consider in this entire goal process is, if you have current contributors to your business, how much are they contributing? What is the donations? Is it frequent? If it is, you need to bring that into your entire budget process to understand what your end goal would be. What is the actual amount that you need to raise? And this will obviously vary depending on the type of business that you're in. It could be seasonal, it could be quarterly reviews, it could be as short as weekly. As I said, it all depends on the type of business that you're in. And then just based on once you have your goals set, you need to then obviously create your plan. And your plan needs to look at, once again, the amount of money that you want to raise. What is the funding for? Is there, as I spoke to previously, from a priority perspective, what is it that you want to focus on? What is your highest priority versus your lowest priority? Can some of your plans be moved out? And then how will you do it? And how long will it take? So how will you do it? There's obviously various ways of receiving funding, and we'll touch base on that again a little later. But just from we have quite a broad variety of ways that you can go and raise funding, and these are just some of the common ones where we can go and try and raise funding from. So obviously from corporates with their CSIs, grants, foundations, others, there's banks, other financial institutions which may not be a bank, but it could be other institutions that could possibly look at your business. And also you need to, and Nikki alluded to this earlier as well, you need to make sure that the donations you receive is long-term. You don't want somebody that invests in your business for only a month or two. You want, and Rosh, you mentioned the marriage. You want this marriage. You don't want just a short-term relationship. You want to make sure that whatever you receive from your investors is a long-term journey with them. And you need to keep track of your plan, and you need to revise it if you see that something is not working, or if there's some caveats in it. You need to be able to change your plan. And then the most important thing that I find that businesses don't, and especially small businesses, the people are not in hand with when they look at their cash flows, or they don't understand cash flows. Once again, we'll speak to this a little later, but you need to know what happens in your business. You don't have to be an accountant to understand what you receive versus what you pay out. You need to just understand the basics. And then as we move along, obviously the cost implement or side of your plan, we need the cost that you need to consider is if you have a website, for argument's sake, it's not for free. You have a webmaster that you possibly need to pay on a continuous basis to manage your website. There could be special events that you need to fund, first of all, to get investors to come to you to possibly put money into your business. There's additional staff costs that you possibly have not thought about. If you do a special event, for argument's sake, or a fundraising event, you may need to pay staff or people to come and manage, the fundraising event, or they need to manage volunteers. You cannot just leave people. Unfortunately, you need to manage all these things. And there's additional fees, which if you go and raise funding from institutions, it could possibly be banking fees, there could be commitment fees. All these things you need to consider. And then the next part of it is your timelines. So you need to establish your timeline. Timelines are crucial because that keeps you on track. And some of your timelines could be annual timelines, it could be quarterly, or as and when. Personally, I think you should review your timelines continuously, ensuring that you stay on track. And then once again, special events, it takes time to do these things. And unfortunately, over the past year and a half with COVID, these are the type of events or that really had serious impacts on businesses, and especially charity organizations or small businesses where they were so reliant on events to raise funding, like golfing events, or just having some artists to come and do a show. So that really impacted the small businesses. And as I've said, it's really important to have your timeline and look at it as a project. Each and everything that you do is a project. It doesn't necessarily mean that because you're raising funding for just normal day-to-day business, it's not a project. It is a project. Everything that you do in your company is a project. Even in banks where we sit, there's a number of things that happens, but it gets tackled in a project manner. And apologies if I'm rushing, because I see our time is running out. Then the next step is to identify your funding sources. So there could be multiple funders or investors, and you need to establish who they are. You need to make sure that the funders that you approach know what your business is about. You need to be able to sell your business to them, and they need to be excited. They need to know what the value proposition would be for them to invest into your business. You also need to ensure that your funders at the end of the day are passionate and that they really want to be part of your business, and that would be one of your retention methods to keep them. Then the next step is the evaluation of your plan. So, you know, you need to look at your plan and make sure that, is it on track? Is it sustainable? Is it long term? If it's not sustainable, you need to understand, why isn't it sustainable? What do you need to do to change that to become sustainable? You rather want to get into the long-term relationships. You don't want to do short-dated funding, because that is a cost to you and your business. Look at who your donors are. Are they existing donors? If they're existing donors, are they donating as frequently as you would like them to do? If not, why are they not committed? So you need to understand why there's no commitment. Is it because they don't believe in what your plan is? So it's important to engage with those donors or investors. And then once again, you need to look at, how successful are you? If you've made mistakes, go and look at why the mistakes were made, learn from your mistakes, and give frequent feedback to your investors. Let them know what's going on. Don't just assume that they'll look at your annual report if you do an annual report, or your annual financial statements. Make sure that they know what you do as a business. And then let's go forward. So reporting to me is really an important part of the business, and this goes sort of hand in hand with your planning and your evaluations. So make sure that, and as I've said earlier, you don't have to be an accountant to manage your cash flows. You can, I'm sure, if you have youngsters in your business, they know Excel very well. I call it's my very sophisticated tool. So you need to just break it down into netted values. Don't go and list your, as I had in the earlier slide where I had your cash flows, where I had your the salaries and your other expenses. Don't go and list them line by line. Go and consolidate the values. That becomes your netted outflow value, versus what you receive in will obviously become, the funds that comes into your banking account, your donations, any projected expenses. Go and put it in a little Excel sheet and get a projected position. And if you love graphs the way I do, then you'll have a little graph that speaks to your little Excel spreadsheet. And with your projections and with your plan, go and show what is it that you want to achieve. If you look at the little graph on the left hand side, I've just, and these are just numbers I suck up last week to get to a little graph, but the red line shows projections. And if you don't get to these projections, you need to obviously go and revise your plan. You need to go and see why are based on your plan and your strategy, why is it that you're not meeting your projections? Is there fundamental flaws in your plan? Go and change them, make them, go and adjust them. It could be a little simple thing where you may just need to go and look at your expenses. It could be something that wasn't there that you've planned for. If it's unplanned, go and make sure that you mitigate any unplanned expenses, or go and project those unplanned projections. You don't necessarily have to know what it is, but go and do a what if. What if I have to pay more on utilities? What if I have to do go and pay staff more? You need to look at the what ifs. And then just some tips on raising funds. So when we look at raising funds, some of the tips, and it really works in the commercial environment, but if you apply it into your little small business, or into your schools for that matter, networking is really important. You need to rub shoulders with, may I call it, the big boys. You need to, it's not what you do, it's who you know in many instances. It's really important to let these people in your communities know, what is it that you do and how can they get involved. And likewise with businesses, there could be businesses in your community, small businesses that may benefit by sort of buying into your business or vice versa. The communication is crucial. You need to be able to communicate what it is that you require. You need to articulate it very well. You must have a powerful executive summary. So almost in a paragraph, when let's assume you do a funding requirement or request to Tshikululu, you need to almost in a paragraph explain to them who you are as a business, what is it that you need, instead of a 40-page document. That's important, but your executive summary tells a person who you are and where you're going. You need to have a detailed business plan. You need to understand what the details and the ideas are within your business plan. Make sure that you know it. Don't get somebody to create a business plan on your behalf and you have no idea what is reflected in your business plan. You need to be able to speak to it with confidence, and you need to be able to articulate the specific requirements when asked. And make sure that your strategies are workable and that they're realistic. Don't request funding for R1 million, and in the current economic environment, that may not be feasible. Break it down into small bite-sized pieces, and make sure that you rather establish and based on your priorities, make sure then that you rather approach it in that manner. And social media, I think all of us in this day and age know how important social media is. Make sure that your business is out there. Make sure you have a website, Twitter, Facebook. Those are platforms where you can market yourself and people will see you. And especially where there may be individuals and wealthy individuals may come across you, on a website or through Twitter or Facebook. And that may just establish a form of investment. And then I think another thing that communities do, they don't understand the importance of community radio station and newspapers. I think they are crucial in our daily lives. Not everybody listens to the big radio stations, and nobody has the funding to go and market through the large or the bigger radio stations. Approach your community radio station. Go to your local newspapers. They generally have cheaper ways of doing advertising on your behalf. But this is really the crux of my presentation, and I would really like to end off with what Walt Disney said. And he said that all our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. And I really think that the sky's the limit. I thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for such a very concise presentation.
Thank you.
You make it look so easy. So let me start with the first question. As an accountant, I hear this quite a lot. Numbers for entrepreneurs are boring. I'd rather outsource this to my accountant. I'm paying him to do all this.
Yeah.
So he'll take care of everything to do with the numbers. So when there's projections or submissions to be made, my accountant will do all that. Your understanding of this topic, how crucial is it for entrepreneurs or leaders of organizations to know their numbers? To what extent should they know their numbers? Should they register for a finance for non-financial managers, or there are certain key numbers that they need to know?
Yeah. So Raj, I personally feel that, and I'm by no means an accountant. Even though I work in a treasury environment, I'm not an accountant. So it's to me, it's really important that entrepreneurs, especially, understand finances. They don't need to understand the textbook. You don't need to understand your full income statement. You don't need to understand the full balance sheet. But to your point, you could go and do a financial course for non-financial managers. It gives you the tools to look at the basics and what you need to do to manage your business. I find that a lot of the businesses that failed was based on people not understanding the financials. And you need to know what comes into your business versus what goes out. You don't need to be a tax expert, but understand, what is taxable versus non-taxable. Where can you get rebates? Understand, what can have a positive impact on your business, especially from a tax perspective. We all pay a lot of tax, and there is ways and means that you can be more tax efficient. And but definitely, to me, I would really suggest that you go and find a course. You don't have to go and do a BCom degree to become an accountant to understand your business. Understand the basics and make sure that you can ask the questions to your accountants. It's important to outsource, I think, especially if you don't have the skill set, but you need to be able or skilled enough to ask questions.
Yeah, thanks for that. So a follow-up question. I mean, there's this, in the entrepreneurship space, there's this saying that if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business, so to speak. And if you look at the reason why businesses fail, I mean, number one is there's no market. You're selling something where, the market is really not interested. That's the first reason. But the second reason businesses go under or bankrupt is because of cash flow management. And the misuse of funds and things like that. I mean, how crucial is it, especially for good governance? Because as an accountant, I get to do books for entrepreneurs, and in the bank statement, I see KFC is being swiped there, airtime is being swiped there. How crucial is this for entrepreneurs to understand the impact that this is having on their ability to raise funds?
So, Rosh, I want to approach this slightly different. So I think it's important that, and I don't say that having a business that failed is bad, because I think it also gives you the ability to rectify where you made mistakes. And a lot of entrepreneurs fail, but they become, and I don't want to use the word wealthy because it's in the wrong context, but they become successful in new businesses, but they used the experience that they had and they've applied it not to make those mistakes again. The other side of your question is, I think it's important for entrepreneurs, especially, or small business owners, you need to split out your personal spend versus business. You should not use your business account to fund your personal spend, because that's how businesses go under. You cannot go and buy airtime for yourself, pay your bond out of your company account, go and purchase a luxurious vehicle out of your business account. That is wrong. You should draw a salary, and you should be able to manage these things out of a salary. Keep it separate. And I hope I answered your question.
Oh, no, you did. Thanks, Nikki. Is there funding out there?
Rosh, I think there is funding out there. I think similar to what Nikki alluded to, I think there's it's specific. I think it's tougher to get funding, but there's definitely funding out there. And working for Discovery Bank, I don't like to mention the other banks, but if you look at the advertisements currently going on from and I can freely say that from a First National Bank perspective, they're really out in the market right now looking at your small businesses and where you actually don't even pay banking fees. So there's definitely, I know Nedbank is also quite active in the small business market. They call it their SME market. Likewise, Standard Bank and the other banks. So there's definitely funding available. It's a question of your application, what is it that you require funding for? So it's obviously based on on the face value that you approach the bank with. So hence you need to understand what your business is, make sure that your goals is clearly articulated in your plan and in your business plan. Make sure that you have a very well written business plan.
One of the biggest challenges, with raising funding in South Africa is often you find there's a need for you to bring collateral, for instance, or they talk about 10% of the amount that you're asking for. Often they say it's commitment fee. Or they say you need to put your own skin in the game, And a lot of entrepreneurs, NGOs, from poor backgrounds, don't have those type of collateral commitments. I mean, in your 30 years, how would you advise, a young entrepreneur watching this and saying, I don't have collateral, I don't have 10%. From your business experience, how do people go about getting around this hurdle?
Sure, that's an interesting question, Rosh. Put me on the spot. So personally, I think what you need to do if you're a young entrepreneur, and I fully agree with you, banks specifically want you to put in money first. They want to see whether you committed. And based on that, they'll then apply a rating on your credit score, etc., and based on that, you'll receive your funding. But they want to see your commitment. I think what you need to do as a young entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in a totality, I think what you need to do is go and approach perhaps people within your community that that's involved in businesses. Go to small businesses in your area and see whether they are prepared to buy a stake in your business or your planned business. That may not necessarily be one of the ways that you want to do it, because I think we also get different entrepreneurs, right? So you get entrepreneurs that's really in it to make money for themselves. They want to get rich and wealthy, and they don't want to share their wealth. But I think from a standing point and as a basis, I think if you don't have funding, if you don't have collateral, go and approach people in your community. There would most likely be somebody that would be interested that you may have never considered. And you can give them shares, or they can just donate, and then you don't have to give them anything back.
So there's this saying that you raise funding from the 3 F's: family, friends, and tools.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about raising funding from alternative sources, what kind of funding should I raise? There's debt in terms of a loan from a bank. There's equity you spoke about, giving away some equity. There's grant funding and all those things.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this buffet of funding options. Which one should I go with? Which one would you advise that I firstly consider, and is there a priority list to follow?
So to me, the way that I would approach it, and I'm not giving any advice, the way that I'll approach it is to say that debt would most probably be the first option. It's fairly easy. So when we talk about debt, just to put it in the context, that would be a loan from a bank or from an institution or from a lender who is willing to lend you money to put into your business, and there's obviously agreements on the back end. So there's terms and conditions that you need to comply with. There's interest rates that you need to agree upon, and this is now part of what you can do as a business owner. Is this is negotiable. The bank can give you, you can put forward your proposal, and the bank can come back and say, well, we're prepared to give you the loan. And the rate is negotiable. That you don't have to accept the rate at face value. Negotiate that rate down if you're in a position to do so. And the term is generally up to 5 years. It could be shorter, but it's easy. It's an easy way of getting funding. If you look at equity is far more involved. There's legal documentation that has to be drawn up. It could be time constraining because it could go back and forth between lawyers. So, and also you may not really want to share in your profits. So it really depends what type of business you're in. If you're willing to share your business, then equity would definitely be one of the ways to do it. The benefit of an equity is that if anything fails within the business, the shareholder actually loses out. But with debt, you have to repay your debt, irrespective of whether your business is profitable or not. Grants, I think, is a good thing. That if you're in an NGO or in a school type of environment, I think grants is great. However, we know that grants is not as efficient as what it should be, especially from a social grant perspective. You may not get what you ask for, and if you get anything, the time delays are. Some of the NGOs I know hasn't received their grants in the past year. So to me, there's really only two options. It's debt and then equity, but debt would be my first choice.
Awesome, thanks. We're left with about 10 minutes, so I want to open the platform to questions out there. If you have any question or comment, please through the question section, please fire your questions our way, and I'll read them through to Sylvia. One comment, Sylvia, and I think you mentioned in your presentation regarding monitoring and evaluation. And Leona Pinar has a comment that I would like to hear your view. And she basically says the depth of monitoring and evaluation is becoming much more critical, but the donors do not allocate extra resources for this increasing level. This really needs to be taken into consideration. Data is critical, but it also does not come free. So donors should keep that in mind. Your thoughts?
Sure. I'm used to reporting to the regulator or to the Prudential Authority, and I dare not do that. Sure. Rosh, I need to think about this one a bit.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one while you're still thinking about that. One from Pumuzo Mutani. Hi, Sylvia. Our business has been operating for a period of 3 years now, and only been selling for a period of 12 months. So basically, sales are 12 months in, even though they've been running for 3 years. When it comes to pricing, we have been using penetration pricing strategies instead of premium pricing. In other words, lower pricing. We thought this was a great strategy because our brand is still new. It could attract customers. But when we meet other successful small businesses, they would advise us that it's a recipe for failure. Do you think it is a great strategy to use price penetration?
I think when you kick off your business, I think it's a good thing to do just to get your brand out there. But you also don't want to go in at the cheapest price, and then there's consequences from, your expenses becomes more than what you receive back. So I don't know what type of business you're in, but if you're a manufacturer and your manufacturing costs is now exceeding, the funds that based on what your sales are, I mean, you're basically insolvent, right? So I would say if you have confidence in what you do, don't look at penetration pricing.
Okay. One of the I mean, every time I hear this, one of the advices that I got is if through price penetration, your value chain needs to augment that. So you wouldn't want to be charging at a lower price if your costs are high. So basically, you are not really financially sustainable. So price penetration only works if you are able to say you are Kulula and you are charging low prices because you are not giving people chicken or beef. So there's no chicken or beef at Kulula, so I can afford to charge at a low price. But you can't want to charge low prices, but still competing with people who are offering chicken or beef.
With the Emirates,
Yes, and still want to offer chicken or beef. So the value chain needs to augment the price penetration. Thanks for that.
Rosh, can you go back to that previous question? You did break up a bit there. The sound is really bad. So why don't you just...
The previous question was, it was a comment basically by Leona with regard to monitoring and evaluation. You mentioned that it's important that, they, as entrepreneurs or as organizations, we monitor and we evaluate. Yes. And what Leona is pulling through is to say, yes, that's fine, but it's expensive to do that exercise as well. Much as data is critical, we also need to understand that to get there is not cheap. And donors should also keep that in mind.
No, absolutely. So I fully agree. I think, when you look at these things, and especially where you have to do reporting, it's going to cost you in the beginning to set up something specific, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go and buy a system, for argument's sake, to do the reporting on your behalf. My suggestion would be that, from a expense perspective, approach universities where you have students, and they may possibly need to do a project of some sort. Get them involved in your business. Get them to, and we have to be so careful now with the POPI Act coming in, from a personal information, the protection of personal information. So what you could do is get them to sign non-disclosure agreements, but get them to come and do the stuff for you, and it may not cost you that much. Just a proposal.
All right. Thank you. We're left with 3 minutes, and I want to use those as, just to get your closing remarks. What question am I not asking you, Sylvia, or what is one thing that we have not, that we're leaving out and that needs to be addressed? Is there anything I'm leaving out?
So Ross, I don't think we've left anything out, but I think, this is such a diverse subject to really talk about. To me, the way I see it is that, especially from looking at our schools, we need to be able to create almost ground phases where we can teach our children and their children, the basis of finances. You don't have to do accounting at school, but give them basic skills, give them ways to work with their own money. I think that's the biggest gap we have in South Africa, is that there's nobody that really teaches you how to work with money. If you have a parent that doesn't necessarily know how to work with money, or they've never actually had an opportunity or a parent to teach them, I think this is one of our biggest problems in South Africa, is that we need to mentor people, and it's not necessarily children. mentor people how to use their money. Irrespective, you don't have to be wealthy to manage your money. Every cent counts. You need to be able to account for what it is. Don't go and just spend. So that to me, I think, just to conclude, is understand what money is and what you can do with money.
Awesome. So basically, numbers are your friends.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Your best friend.
On that friendly note, thank you so much, Sylvia, for such an insightful session, and I wish you all the best and continue doing the amazing work.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, and that's a wrap for today. Just to recap, day 2, we started with Timothy's session addressing mental health challenges in the workplace, and he had Tswelo Kodisang and Cassey Chambers. And after that session, we then went into fundraising for growth with Firoze and Nikki, and we just wrapped up the masterclass, preparing your business for funding, with Sylvia. I hope that those 3 sessions basically encapsulate making every cent count. Tomorrow, day 3, just to give you a snap of what's happening tomorrow. In the morning, we'll have Barry Schwartzbeck, the co-founder of Discovery, and we're talking everything innovation and technology and leadership. I'm looking forward to his thoughts. And then Timothy will come with managing remotely with PJ, and also shifting to digital with Joe van Niekerk. So tomorrow, it's still going to be another action-packed, insightful sessions where we'll be talking innovation, digitization, and the 4IR. So I'm looking forward to that session. On that very same note, thank you to the team, to the guys working behind the scenes in the background, the Discovery team, and everybody who came through, the speakers, the facilitator, and for your attention as well. And looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you so much.